In the grand scheme of things, football is a relatively new invention, barely 100 years old in its current form, and yet it has produced so many amazing stories you would need a lifetime to tell them all. And I know you're all probably thinking what on earth could cause someone to ask themselves how an ancient Greek football league would look like. Well, hear me out. I've always been a fan of both history and football, and when I came across Icarus Football one evening, this video idea popped into my head. If you are unaware of what Icarus Football is, they are an amazing team of creators who design various historic kits, and their newest collection focuses on a sort of Champions League of the ancient Greek world. So join me on a journey through the ancient Mediterranean as we explore the Hellenic League of Champions and its teams. We begin our journey in the westernmost city of the Hellenic League, Massalia, established around 600 BC by colonists from Anatolia fleeing Persian conquest. It has become one of the jewels of the Mediterranean, profiting from the rich trade routes of the region. The colony, now a sprawling city, maintains links to its cousins in the mainland Greece, and is the home of explorers that have traveled as far as the west coast of Africa. Considering the position of the city at the extremity of the Greek world, and the long journey of at least 7 days necessary to reach it, the local football team FC Massalia draws its players from the local Greek population, often supplemented by players from the neighboring Gallic tribes and journeymen in search of new adventures. This cosmopolitan mix of personnel contributes to a somewhat unorthodox style of play, different from the rigid play styles found in the Greek homelands. Many supporters of the other teams view the Massalians as rather soft and effeminate, with the proverb, "you are coming out of Massalia," used to denote this disdain. However, a trip to the local stadium, nicknamed the Lion's Den, is a surefire way to frighten every opposition team and fan. From Massalia, we head east to the island of Rhodos, which is often described as the eastern gate to the Aegean Sea. Dominated by the local statue of the Colossus, the island prides itself for having men who have attained fame throughout the Aegean. One of them, Diagoras of Rhodos, was instrumental in the rise of the local football team Helios Rhodos. Even though he trained as a boxer, Diagoras proved himself to be just as effective in front of goal as he was in the ring. In 5 seasons, he amassed a frankly insane 114 goals, before he passed the torch on to his 3 sons, Akousilaos, Damagetos and Dorieus, who now comprise the team's midfield trident. And whilst they might not be as insanely talented as their father on an individual level, their near telepathic interplay has given a new dimension to Rhodos games. This enables Helios to rely on quick transitions from defense to attack in a high-tempo fashion. Another ace up their sleeve is the tallest player in the league, who stands in Helios' goal, and you can probably tell that he is nicknamed the Colossus. Just to the southwest of Rhodos lies Crete and its fabled Minoan palaces of Knossos. One of the oldest civilizations in the Mediterranean, the Cretans pride themselves on being the first and oldest, always the inventors and always the ones who have given the world their ideas. One of these ideas is said to be football itself, with locals apparently coming across a spare ball of yarn one day and starting to kick it about. In the gigantic palace complex of Knossos, the local team, LAC Knossos, plays at the aptly named Palace Stadium. They pride themselves on being the oldest football club in the world, and their trophy cabinet is filled to the rafters. This air of superiority cuts both ways, with Labyrinth Athletic Club Knossos, which is the club's full name, often managing to overcome opponents even on their most mediocre of days, but also often underestimating their rivals to devastating consequences. From Crete, we now head north to the land of Macedon, home to one of the greatest commanders of all time. What many people don't know about Alexander is that he was also one of the best footballers of all time. In his playing days, he led his team Pella Macedon through a 10-year undefeated streak and built the foundations of a footballing empire. Throughout his conquests, he established feeder teams from Greece to India. For decades, the Greek world had no answer to the rigid phalanx style of football of Pella, and it was only after Alexander's untimely departure that other teams managed to get a look in. Sadly for the team, despite their network of feeder clubs churning out talent from across the known world, Pella is now a ruin. Alexander's companions took over his team and managed to disagree on practically everything, leaving the club in a constant state of internal turmoil, which naturally translated to on-the-pitch mediocrity. This has opened the door to the so-called second club of the city, Pimpleia. Founded by local fans as a direct opposition to the imperialistic, rigid and raucous image of Pella Macedon, Pimpleia draws its power from the Muses. Often seen in the stands at games, they lead their supporters in beautiful, calming hymns meant to complement Pimplea's fluid playstyle. This playstyle, often dubbed poetry in motion by the pundits, is directed by hometown hero and captain Orpheus, with whom Pimplea are now Pella's main team. Whilst the fabled phalanxes of Macedon have conquered both the known world and the footballing scene, they still do not strike as much fear into the hearts of their opponents as the Spartans. As the Hellenic world becomes increasingly interconnected, Sparta remains staunchly traditionalist. Their warrior society serves only one purpose, and that is breeding the most complete fighters on the planet. A city dedicated to the art of warfare, the god Ares dominates the local religious landscape and lends his name to the local football team. Ares Sparta are one of the most decorated teams in the Hellenic Leagues, winning 38 Peloponnesian Cups and 7 Hellenic Champions Leagues. Key to their success is their academy and their club culture. Upon looking at the rather small stadium called Old Tigetion, many dismiss Ares Sparta as a relic from a bygone era, still banking on their frightening reputation. But among the ever-increasing transfer fees and scandals of the Greek league, Sparta doesn't believe in transfers. They flat out refuse to sign any players, instead fully relying on their academy. The team's starting lineup is exclusively reserved for full Spartan citizens, trained in the specific Spartan style of football. Uncompromising, tough, aggressive, quick, and without any unnecessary frills, Ares Sparta lunges at its opponents through quick line-breaking counterattacks aided by their philosophy that the ball must be recovered as quickly as possible through any means necessary. Just to the west of Sparta lies its age-old enemy Athens. A famously free-spirited society, Athenians are the complete antithesis to Spartans, which of course is reflected in the style of football they play. Kerameikos Athens are not only Ares Sparta's most bitter rivals, but also the only club in the world to be completely fan-owned. Based in the city's ceramic neighborhood, their democratic leadership style means that Athenians get to vote on every aspect of the club, entrusting Pericles to lead them to glory. The fabled tactician and manager tinkers with his starting lineups late into the night in an attempt to field the most tactically complete 11 the world has ever seen. He is especially careful when preparing his teams for the Hellenic derby against Sparta, as victory in the derby is one of the most coveted badges of honor in the Aegean. The fierce rivalry between Athens and Sparta might seem like a petty local squabble to the citizens of Kyrene, who concern themselves only with the pursuit of pleasure. Another Greek colony, Kyrene, sees itself as a place where you can escape the tumult of the Peloponnesus and live life to the fullest. Their local philosopher Aristippus established ethical hedonism as a way of life, which was quickly accepted by the locals. When he is not searching for pleasures, he often moonlights as the assistant manager of the local football team Kyrenaikai United, who stresses the importance of maintaining football as a fun game. Their playstyle is heavily influenced by this, with the players being free to pursue their passions and personal motivations both on and off the pitch. Does training make you happy? Then train. Does partying and the company of beautiful women seem more pleasant? Then by all means follow your heart. This attitude often translates to a seemingly discombobulated playing style, but with this large amount of freedom to express themselves, players often become better footballers and better teammates. Regarded by many as the masters of reclamation projects, many players experiencing sharp declines revive their career completely and even attain new levels whilst playing for the club. With the rising popularity of football in the ancient world, other cultures and nations that border the Greeks have started taking up the sport. Whilst initially viewed with disdain by Hellenics, these nations could prove themselves to be future superpowers. One of them, the Scythians, learned to play football from the Greek traders that sailed to the shores of Crimea to trade with the nomads. Tall and powerful and used to a life of speed and formational fluidity, the Scythians seem perfectly suited for football, even though their tactics are rather rudimentary compared to the more established sides. In Athens, a contingent of Scythians have been employed by the city as an independent police force, able to rise above the petty rivalries and loyalties of the polity. Their commander Speusinos saw a unit of fit young men, most of them standing over 6 feet tall, as an opportunity and established Scythian Archers, Athens' newest football team. With utmost loyalty to the shirt and their commander and manager, the Archers play for the badge and not for themselves. It only remains to be seen if this approach of the ultimate team spirit can prove the critics wrong. Another eastern area of the world known to the Greeks that benefited from the introduction of football is Colchis. located in the area of modern-day Georgia. Dioscurias FC, located in the sprawling Black Sea trade city, is the perfect example of the multiculturalism fostered by the Greeks in their colonies. Their manager, the legendary King Aeetes, has assembled a young squad of various origins and has a very sizable backroom staff. Most of these employees are in fact translators and interpreters who aid the manager in communicating his tactics with the many ethnicities in their squad. Despite this linguistical setback, he maintains that football is a universal language that can unite us all. Slightly to the southwest of Colchis, Phrygia is the home of one of the most iconic teams in the Hellenic leagues, namely Real Midas. The club motto reads as follows: if you were lucky enough to watch a game at the Cibele Citadel, you'd find that all that glitters is gold. The club has embraced the legend of King Midas and has made it their identity. Naturally, with such a patron king, the club's finances are some of the most potent in the Mediterranean. This comes from the fact that they are some of the first teams that created a whole brand around their identity, with special attention dedicated to their shirts and stadium designs and signing superstars. They are on their way to becoming the first super club of the ancient world. It only remains to be seen if this financial might can be translated onto their pitch performances. The small islands of the Aegean Sea have not lagged behind the mainland when it comes to the pinnacle of Greek football, and we can find 3 top-flight teams on these islands, namely Paros FC, Delos FC and Naxos FC. Paros FC's stadium, the Karites, was considered the most beautiful stadium in the world, a polished, inch-perfect masterpiece by sculptor and architect Skopas, composed entirely out of the luxurious and translucent Parian marble. Visiting teams often had a hard time adjusting to the low visibility caused by the sunlight reflecting off the stone, which, unless stained red by the wine of their noisy Naxian neighbors, was impeccably white. The Parian Stadium was adorned with a series of marble statues representing the 3 Graces, who are also to be found on their crest. The Parians worshipped these goddesses, who represented a combination of beauty, creativity, and goodwill. Delos FC is one of the few clubs in the known world that are completely owned and operated by a private enterprise. The Sacred Island Bank has at one point been the financial hub of the Delian League, and Delos served as its capital. This has propelled the rather small local club to prominence, and the main critics of the side speculate that the bank has sometimes dipped their hands into the war chest to sign 1 or 2 superstars. Naxos is Dionysios' birthplace, and if you visit the new Naxion Stadium on any match day, you'll be able to tell by the copious amounts of wine running around. As you can imagine, the fans of Naxos FC are sometimes viewed as a raucous bunch of drunks, and on a few occasions, those preconceptions were proven to be right. However, their hardcore fans, the Naxos Nois, are some of the most dedicated in Hellas. After a particularly heavy and humiliating defeat to Paros, they showed their continuous support for the club by swimming back home alongside the team's trireme. Not everyone is able to go to Corinth, goes the ancient saying. Nor was everyone able to play for them either, as Corinth is one of the most successful clubs in the Hellenic League, home to some of the most elite names in the ancient game, from Diocles to Xenophon. Corinth's captain is called the Bellophron in reference to the hero who tamed the Pegasus, which he found drinking water from a local spring inside the temple of Acropolis. Before every game, the players drink from the same fountain as a pre-match ritual. Corinth's local rival Sphates was initially founded as an alternative to its successful and richer counterpart, with them boasting of having goal nets weaved by Clotho, the spinner goddess. Their humble stadium, the Tent, sits right next to the city's temple complex and is said to be the place for various rituals before every game. As the stadium is closed for visitors whilst these take place, the rumors naturally spiraled out of control and reached some truly insane levels of paranoia. Just as fiercely independent as Corinth are the inhabitants of Samos. The powerful city-state was the birthplace of Pythagoras, who designed FC Samos Stadium in between his theorem building sessions. His most famous theorem was naturally used to shape the goalposts used in football. Nowadays, Samos are commanded at sea and on the pitch by the same man, Melissus. Whilst he is at heart a philosopher, he has used his talents both to defend his homeland at sea and to win games for his local football club. When it comes to his players, he has described his mantra as follows: I think of the team as one, not as a group of players. We play as a single unit, no player is above the team. One of the biggest debates that permeate the world of Greek sports is whether or not football should be viewed as part of the Olympics or stand on its own. Olympic Avelis, based in the area where the Olympiads take place, feel very strongly about this. A multi-sport club, their players train, compete, perfect themselves, and more often than not, win in as many sports as possible. Track and field disciplines are intermingled with football at this club, and the club has won 9 Hellenic Champions Leagues in its long history and over 30 Peloponnesian trophies, which is viewed as the strongest argument for interdisciplinarity. Right to the north of the Greek peninsula lies Thrace, and the city of Abdera ruled by King Diomedes, an avid fan and defender of the local team Thrax Abdera. I say defender because on more than one account he has had to come out publicly in defense of his team and his players. Famous for their superiority, the Greeks consider the Abderans to be barbaric, violent thugs, and whilst pitch invasions have occurred on several occasions, Thrax Abdera are not the only culprits. As King Diomedes put it, when the same things happen at the games featuring Spartan and Athenian teams, we don't hear a peep about it. Speaking of Sparta, remember their rule of fielding only Spartan players? You might be wondering, what happens to all the other inhabitants of the city that don't wish to be second-tier citizens and play football? Well, some of them emigrate, and most of them emigrate to Taras. The city, which lies in the south of the Italian peninsula amongst other Greek colonies in Sicily and southern Italy, a region popularly called Magna Graecia, was founded by the Parthenians. These Spartans, born out of wedlock unions, were initially promised citizenship before the city's leadership went back on their word. So they emigrated and founded one of the most commercially lucrative cities in the Mediterranean. This influx of wealth has contributed to the rise of the local team Taras FC, who are now strong enough to stand against their parent city and even defeat them on several occasions. The Spartans are perhaps unmatched in battle, but for one specific unit. The Sacred Band of Thieves, around 150 pairs of lovers dedicated to one another and their unit, are the only ones who stood against the Spartans and lived to tell the tale of their victory. When opponents saw Thebes FC appear on their fixture list, they could have been mistaken in thinking a trip to the northwest of Athens to be a walk in the park, despite the area's natural beauty. There was no question that the fertile surrounding area's plentiful water springs were pleasant on the eyes, but once opponents came across the Cadmea, the seven-walled fortress Thebans called home, they quickly realized that pleasantry was not in the club's vocabulary. Mycenae, based in the fertile Peloponnese, was the second oldest club in Greece. It famously preferred proven warriors over Olympic athletes on its team sheet. "I only look for killer instinct," professed manager King and former player Agamemnon. Neither was its football modern, spurning possession and instead focusing on brute physicality. It won players like Achilles a few red cards, but it also won them titles. Though Achilles' strength terrified any backline he charged at, it was how he combined it with his dexterous finesse that earned him so much praise. Unsurprisingly, the striker was known to wow fans with a silky back heel or two. Mycenae's fierce rivals are the last on my list, namely Troy City. The Troy City squad boasted stars from the proto-false 9 Hector and his brother Paris to towering centre-back Sarpedon and the golden boy Aeneas. After the destruction brought about by the Trojan War and the exile or death of many of its best players, the team now looks to rebuild its lost legacy. And so our journey across the ancient Greek world concludes, and I hope you all enjoyed this exercise in imagination. If you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to purchase any of the kits depicted in the video, I will put the link in the description.